So welcome. Why don't we get started? Our first subject on the agenda is branding and marketing for Foxborough, and we'll be talking about business guide and samples and next steps. Paige, do you want to start?
Sure. So the reason this is on the agenda and sort of put together is that, well, I know Lorraine's going to talk about the business guide, but one of the things that I've talked about with Bill Keegan, who's on the call, Mike Johns, the assistant town manager, we've discussed this need for branding for Foxborough. And if you start to, for the town of Mansfield, I joke, frustratingly enough, has just done a really good job on their branding. And to the point where I'm on social media and all I see is Discover Mansfield with their little logo. So we need to elevate our branding as well. And I know Mike Johns recently went to a conference where they were saying they had, they were able, silly thing, but you can't put a town seal on things. That's not a logo. Whereas if you have branding, you can kind of start to brand the community. So we were talking about that desire to get something off the ground. And then I know you were looking at a business guide. That would be somewhat sort of part and parcel. That would be one more resource to sort of sell the community and to make it easy for folks inquiring into the community to find everything at their fingertips.
Right. I had a couple of meetings working with Diana Gray this summer and using the Franklin Business Guide as a model. She began the process of updating the content of the Foxborough Business Guide as it exists, and so made some progress, but then really when it got to the point of looking at style and then seeing as that was being worked on, Franklin has updated, now Mansfield has a brand new one, we realized we're kind of really should look at a more professional approach to this so that we can, again, in line with having this branding process, be able to have something that's really more professionally done than our attempts that we've done so far. So I think information-wise, progress is being made on that update, but I think it would be important for us to get some financial help. So I did have a meeting with Bill and Diana, and we did talk about that, and that's where more discussion came up about branding and marketing and what's going on, as Paige said, in Mansfield. And so I think there's a meeting planned for January to talk about communication in general, and I think this is all going to hopefully tie that together, and so we can get some traction really to addressing this aspect of business development for the town.
Yeah, and this, I'm sorry, but so this also, I think, would tie into our website. We had this great website that kicked off, but I think, I've realized that, at least from a workload and a creative point of view, I'm not necessarily a website person. And Heather, same thing. Like, we can do the nuts and bolts to a point, and even that is scary, because all I can remember is Sandra telling me not to touch anything on the front page, or I could, delete the whole thing. So, every time I'm in there, I am petrified that I'm going to do something wrong. So I think all part of this is all part of my campaign, which Bill's well aware of, Bill Keegan's well aware of, is eventually we're going to start seeing some ARPA money trickle down. And I'm, thinking that for very small dollars towards economic development, this might be a good endeavor to sort of work on, website. I'd also like to get a better inventory for the community so that when I'm sending out those emails and saying, does anybody know if we have, a 200,000 square foot warehouse? We have that more accessible. So I think we could really elevate our economic development presence and our sort of appearance to the outside world just by some pretty minor steps. And I'm also fortunate that the housing component, I've been spending a lot of time on housing for the past couple of years, and that's kind of winding down to a point. We still have Walnut Street and that, but I think economic development at this point is probably more the focus, and starting to, focus COVID recovery, Route 1, Uptown, all the successes there. So I think this could all be part of elevating Foxborough.
Lorraine, if I...
Yes.
I was at a regional meeting and talking to the Easton Board of Selectmen chair, and she was showing me an app they had. I don't know if that's, I'm not saying it's the right way to go, but it was just interesting. It's like a living, breathing guide. And she said for ease of update, businesses can actually claim their own businesses on the app and update hours or, whatever it may be.
So
and she mentioned they did that through a grant. So I just had never really thought of an app before, but, you know, as times are changing and the ease of being able to update stuff, it just was another alternative to maybe look into and see what Easton's doing.
Great idea.
Yeah, that'd be great. I think using technology, you know, to our advantage. I mean, a lot of times we are right on our phone. We're not at a desktop or a computer to do it. So I think coming up with some sort of strategy, maybe just that this group decides to maybe spend a little focus on this, that we start working on the overall, you know, and maybe break it down. We can have the Route 1 component, the Uptown component, technology and all that, but kind of it covers almost all of our subcommittees. We could all each have a piece of it. And I think we could pull together something pretty comprehensive. I don't know if Bill or Heather, Catherine's involved in that. I mean, we have all the stakeholders here. Mike Saig has joined our call, our Zoom.
Heather?
Oh, we can't hear you.
Can't hear you. You're,
Give us 1 second. You're not muted, but
No, I'm not muted.
there you go. Now we hear you.
Now you can hear me? Okay.
Yes.
God knows I am technologically challenged, but Renee is not. And we have a great app like that we use for recreation. And I would be happy to, you know, get with her and see if there's some way to kind of link them together or what we could get out of that. Because like you said, Leah, our page, we're always on our phones and people sign up for our classes. They find our fields. They can figure out if they're open and closed. They can find out all sorts of stuff on this Your Big Backyard app. So there's no reason, you know, people have really taken to that. I don't know why we couldn't do the same thing on the town side.
And the Easton
So
chair.
if I could just say a few things. First of all, I couldn't agree more with Paige in that we really do need to. I think Lorraine has touched upon this too. That we really need to think more about talking to professional marketing people about how we do our work, because the branding that happened in Mansfield was not done in-house. It was done by a professional branding firm that knew how to capture what was really the essence of what Mansfield wants to accomplish. And we should do that. And you know, what we're talking about is really the tools of the trade at this point, which we will get to, no question about that. But I think the first and foremost is to come up with a branding line that will lead us in that direction, and then use the different tools. Like an app, I think is great. I do think that, you know, having a presence on a website is great too. I think having a Twitter presence, all those things are tools, but we need to have the notion of what we want to be represented, but with first, and then go in that direction. So, you know, finding money for this is a challenge, as you all know. You do have some money in the economic development fund that could be used for that. But you could also, at the same time, I mean, I'm not opposed to using ARPA money, and I'll get into that discussion a little later tonight, because and we're a little challenged by how we can use that money right now, because the guidelines are still not clear. And I just saw recently that the city of Methuen who spent about $650,000 in funds. I think it was more CARES funds than it was ARPA funds, but they actually used that fund, and now the state's going back to them and saying you got to pay it back because you didn't use it right. So we're being very cautious and careful about how we use that money, making sure that we don't end up within a clawback situation where we lose it back, going back to the state or federal government. So I think we're moving, you know, very carefully and quite consciously in a direction that will get us in a good place to use that money. But those are all good ideas. I think EDC is a great direction to use it for. I think that's also consistent with what the intent was for the rebuild effort after COVID. And I do think that can be used, but again, it's not going to be up to us to determine that. It's going to be up to the federal government to say yes, no, you can use it for this purpose. So that's more to come on that front, because, and believe me, I'm more frustrated than anybody in this area, because I'm ready to use it now, but I can't. I'm not going to use it until I'm sure that we can use it the right way.
thanks, Bill. Anyone else on Zoom have any other comments?
Barney's shaking his head no. No. Catherine, nothing, no. Okay, there we are.
I was shaking my head no because I was on mute. No, I have no comments.
Okay, thanks. All right.
So I guess we have to be patient, but I think we are heading in the right direction, and it could be fun.
Yeah.
Yeah. I agree.
Great, thank you. Next item is future use of the former state hospital auditorium, question mark?
So that's kind of throwing spaghetti against the wall. We all know that the town has control of this former auditorium at the state hospital. It is restricted in its use, as was most of the property up there. My understanding is, you can go through legislative approval to get a restriction if you have a sound argument for it. We've had a few people come look at the auditorium, a brewery, a few other doctor's offices, different people, and every single time I say that, every single time I bring someone in, the tire kicker's in, they never come back. So I don't know what it is. I've also thought, I'm wooing two boards. I'm wooing the EDC with just trying to come up with an idea, but also the housing authority, because I'm like, maybe that could be somehow retrofitted or converted into some sort of senior housing, even though the residential capacity at the state, that would require a real discussion, because through the state hospital reuse plan, 203 residential units were allowed, and those are accounted for. So this would be different, so I don't want to cover that up, but I also think senior housing is sometimes looked at a little differently. But again, I'm not even sure if it's realistic that anyone could actually work with that building, how to retrofit it. So, one of the ideas I had, and I don't know if Catherine can speak to this too, being a planner and real estate person, but, is maybe doing some sort of RFI or something where we allow the experts to tell us what they could do with it, and then we could just to sort of get a conversation going, because in the meantime, it just sits and sits and sits, and I assume it deteriorates and becomes more of a burden on the community. So, I don't know that there's a solution out there, but I'm just trying to keep it sort of on everybody's mind.
Catherine, do you have any experience in how you would go about, trying to get that type of input?
Absolutely, and I think Paige is right on with an RFI. If nothing else, it will show what the existing current interest is in the market. Certainly that could change going forward, but it would give us a good current perspective of what some realistic reuse might be. Just looking at the item, and as Paige was speaking, I was thinking housing first and foremost came to my mind, knowing that there are limitations and that the market might not support that given the constraints of the building. But there's also creative things like a collaborative workspace, for example, which we don't have. There could be demand. But again, I think Paige's idea of the RFI is exactly right on, and I'd be happy to help work on drafting something along those lines.
That'd be great.
That'd be great. Thank you.
Madam Chair, if I could just mention that, since this is former state property, and I'm wondering, Catherine, if you know this or not, but is there state funding available for reuse purposes that could be used just to study the property to find out what the highest and best use would be for it? Is that possible to look at that?
I am happy to look into that. There possibly could be something. I'm thinking maybe mass development. Nothing other than that is coming to mind, but I can certainly check into that.
That'd be great. Thank you.
Building on that, I should say that the mass development, One Stop for Growth, which is the new grant program through the state, today, December 15th, they opened up the expression of interest process. So that's now open for the next 3 or 4 months. If you get your request for review, the expression of interest is just the first phase of. There's now 12 grant programs offered by the state, the biggest one being MassWorks. So we will definitely be submitting again for the Walnut Street project. We got some great advice about the last one. We did the MassWorks and we did not get it. And one of the reasons is we did it under the town of Foxborough. This time it's going to go under the housing authority. And they didn't realize, they were kind of, why isn't Foxborough putting up any money for this? And we said, well, we did a lot for this, but this is actually a housing authority, which is a quasi-state agency, and they thought that was a big difference. So, but I do think as part of the expression of interest on the town side, and maybe on the housing authority side, so this is where my competing into that, we might have this project on both of those, just to at least, that would open us up to Catherine's point of mass development. They have, I don't know, what is it, site readiness, and then there's reuses, and I think there might even be something on collaborative workspaces. I really like that idea if the housing didn't work out. So anyway, my point being is that's great timing to bring this up, because I think we should, if this group is okay with it, we'll put that on the expression of interest. And then what that does is gets the state agencies to give us feedback and gets it on their radar screen and to help us figure out next steps after that. And then in the meantime, we could possibly be looking at an RFI to at least, like Catherine said, get the current and realistic view on this property if there really is interest in what we could pull together.
Great. Sounds good. Thank you.
Lorraine, I have a question. Maybe Bill knows. Is that site still being considered for the intergenerational center down the road, or has that been ruled out?
It was one of the sites that was put out, but it actually fell to like the last place in consideration. There were two locations ahead of. The only reason why we looked at that was because, first of all, we own it, and the second reason was because it probably would have been okay zoning wise if we put it there as well. But we think that the empty site above it is actually a better location for that. And in fact, the location below where the old laundry building was is actually a good location as well. So in terms of rankings, they ranked higher. But there are other things that people are throwing out as options as well. But I think right now, because we own those properties, they're the ones that cause the least amount of concerns for us in terms of first looks, anyways.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. We all set with that discussion?
So, Lorraine, you may remember this, and maybe, and Heather, you may as well, but that land, the state hospital property, I think we looked at rezoning that at one time. Maybe Bonnie, you remember this too. We looked at rezoning that. And it got pushed back from town meeting at the time because, as I recall, people were concerned about what that might look like as an actual project. And I think that if we're going to be successful in reusing that property, I think the best approach would be to actually identify a real use potential and then presenting that to town meeting for possible zone change. Because people get nervous when you just change the zone and not know what's going to go on it. And I sense that, after looking at that reaction, I said, well, and it really was a pretty mundane approach to, and I didn't see any real concerns. They were more emotional concerns than anything, but not real concerns. But I think that killed it because people were just afraid of what it might produce. Mm-hmm. So I think we might want to look at that as for a real project, and having a study of that right out of the gate would be good to at least identify what the real potentials are.
All set? Thank you. Okay, the next item, 131 Moore Street, we're going to postpone that item till the next meeting. So ARPA strategy, update from Bill.
So I alluded to this earlier that the one thing that we are waiting for right now is final guidance from the U.S. Department of Treasury, which will give us a real indication as to how we might use the money. I've said this right from the beginning that thoughts about planning for the use of that money, I think are premature until we actually know what the uses can be utilized for. So there are a few things that we know that we can use it on, and that's for infrastructure, water, sewer. We can use it for internet capabilities, things of that nature. But we've done a lot of water work already, and we've done some sewer. But the sewer work that we need to do would be much higher need in terms of dollars. If we were going to look at, say, a big project like Route 1, we'd have to look at a much bigger allocation than that which we're going to receive, which we are supposed to receive. So I do think that we can look at that maybe as a project at the state level to see if in fact we could utilize some funds there. And I had had a preliminary conversation with Mike Stanton about this, but I think we're going to try and look at what those potentials might be, and Mike was going to reach out to to Chris and Lance to have a further conversation with them on that. But I do think that right now, and I had this conversation today with the county as well, the county director as well as the county administrator agree with me that he says, right now, until we know what the final guidelines are going to be, we're going to be in a wait and see mode. So I have worked closely with Congressman Auchincloss's office, and he in turn has worked with Senator Markey as well as Senator Warren on trying to get assistance on how this might work. Excuse me. I think the problem we're having is that we've identified the fact that we did take a significant hit and loss of revenue through last year, through COVID, which we've laid out and presented to the federal government and to the state about how much we've lost. But there was an offset requirement that if we received any major grants, we would have to offset that with the money. And the major grant that we received last year, strangely enough, was a state building assistance grant, which was identified for the payment of a down payment, with a payment towards the debt service on the borough school project. Now, obviously, we can't use that for anything but that project, but the federal government guidelines have stated that because we received that grant, we have to offset that loss, that gain with all the losses. And so when we did that and compared the two funds together, we had a $4.5 million loss, and then we identified a $6 million grant, so we ended up with a net gain, supposedly according to the guidelines, of $1.5 million. Clearly, that's not the case, and so Congressman Auchincloss has been working with us to try and fix that. We're not the only community in Massachusetts with that problem. He's actually spoken directly with Secretary Yellen on this issue on our behalf, so she's fully aware of that, and they're working on the final guidelines, and we're hoping that they will address that in the final guidelines. But until we see that language appear, it's going to be difficult for us to make any kind of commitment towards the use of those funds. Now, I think if we, we can identify a lot of different things, but at the end of the day, until we know we can use it, I'm not sure we should put a lot of effort into that approach until we have a better understanding of that. Now we have until 2024 to spend the money. So we're not in any real pressure to do that at this point, but we certainly could use it for a lot of capital issues that we have right now. It's going to be a tight capital year coming into 2021 or 2022, fiscal 23 rather at this point. So I'm anxious to try and get answers on that, so maybe we can use some money for certain things, including economic development, which is Paige and I have talked about as a potential place we could park some of that money. So that's the latest information I have for you. I wish I had more, but based upon the conversations I've had with my colleagues today at Norfolk County level, they said, well, our position is exactly where it should be. We shouldn't do anything else until we hear more from the federal government on that. Okay. So that's my report on that situation, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Quick question, Bill.
Sure.
Those funds are available both at the state and at the local level?
Yeah, so how that works is that we received, the money has come to us in two different tranches. One is a direct payment to Foxborough, which is going to be in the end, about $1.9 million. We received already an actual payment of $925,000, which we received the end of June. We'll receive another $925,000 payment in the end of June next year, which is the direct payments that came to Foxborough. Then we also we're due to receive another $3.8 million from the county, which the county has set up a process by which we can actually receive that money. So we'd have to apply for it and then get it. And basically what this county is serving is sort of like an audit system, so that they're actually auditing the money, so to make sure that if whatever money that gets paid out will not be in a situation where we'll end up having to pay it back. So we have retained the services of a company. Actually, it's just to be the same consultant that Norfolk County is using for the Norfolk County piece. We use a company called CLA Consultants, Clifford Lawson Associates, who is actually going to be working with us on trying to determine the proper uses of those funds. So they will advise us on our use, but the county will advise us on the use of their funds, and they'll be closely aligned, but not obviously not the same. So.
Thank you.
So there's exactly 2 payments at this point. There's also other areas. There's a lot of federal money floating around right now, and it's going to be seen. We're going to see a lot of it over the next few years. You saw that there was a $1 trillion infrastructure bill that has made its way through Congress and signed by the president, and we're waiting for guidelines on that as well. And the Build Back Better bill, which is law, which I just heard from the congressman today on, saying that they're going to do some sort of an announcement on that. I think by tomorrow, if I'm not mistaken. So we'll have a little bit of a better understanding of that as well. So the question is how much we can use the money, how much will be considered to be eligible for the funds. And I do think we're going to see a lot of money towards road reconstruction, a lot of infrastructure, new bridges, dams, things of that nature that we can always use help in as well. So we're gonna see if in fact we can use those funds in those directions as well. So it's all out there. We just don't know when and how we can acquire it and when we'll get it. But it's at least the steps have been taken, and we're waiting to hear on all those fronts.
So more patience.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's what I wasn't born with.
Yeah, I mean, it's good to be patient, but it's driving me a little bit crazy because we know we have access to these funds, but we can't use them. And I'm not going to be, I'm just being honest with people that we got to be careful here because the last thing I want to do is paying money back if we do it wrong. And I think, I do think it makes a lot of sense. I think Leah and I have talked about this, and Paige as well, that we want to make sure that if we do use the money, that and I really encourage my colleagues in the management field to do the same. Make sure you use the money for something that's going to be long lasting and significant, as opposed to something that's just sort of going to be, pay it and be gone with it. Like they talked about bonuses and stuff like that. I'm not sure that's a good idea, and I think, frankly, I think the public itself is really not a big fan of that. So I think we'll stay clear of that as much as we can. But I do think that on the other side of it, that we should actually build something, significant that could last 15, 20, 25 years. That could be really good for the community in the long term, and we can look back on it and say, we used the federal money to pay for that. And leave something, that's a legacy project for the community on several different fronts. I mean, that's just my general philosophy, and I hope, others. I'm sure others will have other thoughts on it too. But I don't think we should just, use this as a pass-through payment to something. We should use it for something that's going to be significant. And building for the future, EDC money as an EDC direction, I think it's a good use of that money, personally. But
Thank you.
so.
I will say Bill's had to put up with me because I keep running to him saying such and such a community is doing this, and to his credit, he sent it off to the consultant, and they said, I don't understand how they're doing that. So while Bill's kind of being a stick in the mud about it, I understand why. And now, it's frustrating to see others doing what is actually not okay, but that's the way life is. So we're not going to worry about them, but Bill is protecting sort of the fiscal soundness of this community and not allowing us to go out and do things even though others are doing it. So
I think you'll be reading about them in the paper soon enough. When we have to give them money
I hope
back.
not for their sake, but yes, you're right.
I hope not too, but I just don't want to be that community either. So I don't want to be that guy, so to speak.
Exactly.
Thank you.
Lorraine?
Yes.
Bill, on the theme of the infrastructure, you mentioned roads and bridges. If we look back over time, this town's been very fortunate that we're at the intersection of two major routes, 95, 495. So think of them as the asphalt highways of the past. we've got to be thinking differently about the future. You mentioned earlier on in the discussion about the application. Well, that is the telecom highway, not the asphalt highway. And much as we all want to see life return to, quote, to normal, we're going to see major changes in the way of our lives that actually stem from the current situation with COVID that will put more emphasis on the telecom highway. I live in the part of the town where it's called the 2 bars, not the 4 bars. And I would therefore suggest that when we talk about infrastructure, we do also think, as you rightly say, to the future, because what we've got to ensure is that people want to live here and don't move out of this area because it doesn't have the future infrastructure. So we can't just be thinking about putting more asphalt down on the roads. It's got to be about what is going to be the structure that's going to make people want to come to live in this area, and recognizing that there's now a major change in the association of where you work versus where you live.
That's absolutely true, and I don't disagree with any of that. In fact, look at how we're meeting tonight. You know, for instance, I'm at my house. I'm meeting part of this meeting tonight. So I mean, this is the way a lot of meetings are going to continue to be conducted over time. People have realized that it's easier to do this than to actually physically be in a room all the time and conducting business. So no question that that is a piece of this puzzle which I do think has to be recognized. We're fortunate in that, as far as the town business goes, that we've actually created our own, fiber system that actually works pretty well. So we're not in the same situation across the town, but there are areas of town, and I drive down South Street many times on the way home, and I'm calling people, and all of a sudden I lose people during the middle of the conversation. Yeah, they have a phone call, a conversation with somebody who will call me and say, "Why are you building that tower there? Why is that tower going up?" I said, because there is a dead spot in that area of town that needs to have coverage. So then you run into those kind of challenges that, okay, which is more important? Is it the environmental issues, or is it the fundamental service issues? So debate like that will continue to go on forever, and I do think, quite honestly, that you're right, that the way we're going to conduct business in the future is going to be far different than the way we've traditionally conducted it, in terms of sitting around a table and doing these conversations. But I think they're going to be more like the conversation we're having on Zoom tonight.
Right.
So in order to do that, you got to have the capability. That's the bottom line.
But the point of you being able to do it from your home, the reason why I'm here is I'm in 2 bar part of the town.
There you go. Right.
You didn't want to be here, is that what you're telling me?
So we need to learn as to how to appropriate more money so that when we're thinking about the infrastructure, we're dealing with the modern infrastructure and not just the past infrastructure.
I think that the challenge we also face, though, too, is that we are, that we only have one real cable provider in Foxborough. I mean, we actually have 2. We have both Verizon as well as Comcast, but those are both privately owned systems, and so we're at the mercy, if you will, of those companies extending those systems in a way that suits their business needs, not necessarily the business needs of individuals throughout the town. So I think that's a bigger conversation that perhaps that's being had, by the way, in other parts of the country.
Yes.
Somebody was saying, I heard this on CNBC last night, that there was a person in Colorado who was trying to conduct business from their home on a 300-acre parcel in the mountains that couldn't do it because they had no service. But now they're extending service to the more rural areas around the world, around the U.S., to provide those kind of services so people can actually conduct business from their property. So I do think that conversation is being held down, and it will be done, and it's going to take a little more time, but I do think we're at a bit of an advantage here because most of Massachusetts is already wired, except for maybe the western areas of the state. But I think even that's getting more attention now than ever, and even Governor Baker was focusing on that during his administration, trying to put more service in those areas. So I do think we're going to see more, but the limitation is really because we have two companies, and they control the construction of those lines for the most part, because it's their infrastructure, not ours. So we're going to have to. That's a conversation we have to have with both those companies, I think, perhaps to see how much they're going to continue to invest in those areas.
But by that, we can't allow the fate of the town to be in the hands of those two companies.
Couldn't agree with you more. I think we have to. There has to be a bigger decision, bigger discussion, and if not, find out what other ways can we do to provide or to assist the system to provide greater coverage.
Yeah.
That's a better conversation to have.
Thank you, John. Okay. Next item, subcommittee updates, action items, discussion, rail trail, pedestrian transit, any update?
I actually have a big update that my group doesn't even know about. I had the opportunity to speak to Amanda Lewis from the Trail Coalition, the group that gives out the grants that we didn't get last year. So I debriefed with her a couple days ago, and it was really helpful. The gist of it is, I meant to type these up, but they didn't fully understand when they were reviewing it. It turns out that it was they thought it was like reusing railroad tracks, not actually going alongside the railroad tracks. So they didn't fully understand that, she doesn't think. But the bottom line is that it didn't compete well at a regional level. Like, it's kind of a standalone unit, standalone project right now, at the very beginning and needing a feasibility study. So she was sort of saying, like, are you guys going to be expecting money to do the feasibility study, the design, and the construction? And I was like, well, I'm not sure. We're just trying to get it off the ground. And she gave me some tips on how to approach it, but basically said, if the community could do this little one, then you'd be better off maybe having the town or try to do this at the local level. So then you go in for a design and you sort of highlight the regional perspective and all that. So the bottom line is that they're just not going to fund, from start to finish. And when it was looked at compared to other projects, it just didn't have the regional significance that many others did. And there were some misunderstandings. So I think now they understand a little bit better. She understood a little more context. I think we'd have to do a really strong narrative if we were going to pursue it about, economic development and how it will eventually tie in. But I think she was really trying to tell me that, come to the well for $30,000 now. You may or may not ever get it, but if you get that, you're probably not going to get the design, which is probably well over that. So I'm not sure we might want to regroup on what our strategy is on that. I don't know that it seems silly to waste our sort of a one card on a little, quote unquote, little project. Not little, but little financially. So, and I just don't get the sense that this had enough bells and whistles to really, again, get even maybe another second time. It might get the
It's
same.
only a couple of miles and they want miles and miles of this. But I like your idea. Let's maybe regroup with the subcommittee and grab VHB and talk about how we can think smartly through that next step.
Sure. Because actually we went to, there was a meeting that Bill was at where they were talking about, it's funny because they said everybody focuses on traffic and congestion. And really the most important thing we could be focusing on right now is pedestrian and bicycles. And not so much just for recreation, to go ride leisurely, but to transport, to move people around, to provide another source, So I think, too, while this is a beautiful amenity connecting uptown to Patriot Place, I think it also could become, if Porter Point gets developed, could become a commuting way. People in town wouldn't even have to get in their cars. So I think we can promote this from an economic development perspective, whether it's ARPA funds or some of the infrastructure coming. Maybe will be creative ways to fund it in the future. So maybe we'll work, maybe right now we start talking strategy, but also start working on the talking points that really make it seem more regionally important. Because it could tie in. all the way to Mansfield, and then that connects all the way to Taunton, and there's Walpole. So it is a small piece, but eventually, if done, it could tie in to greater connections. So I don't want to sell it short. It's just you got to start somewhere.
Well, technically, you could go all the way up to Framingham,
Right.
so.
Yeah. So. All right. So that's my update
Yeah, I think
on
it's-
that one.
We'll work to set that up
On
with
the- on the-
Catherine and Tom.
Great.
On the bike path is actually, is I think a great connection, because Mansfield has one as well. And we could probably, I don't know, find a way to connect that to Mansfield as well, and connect it all the way to Patriot Place and beyond, as Dan was referring to, into Framingham if we could. Because it really does make a lot of sense to utilize the right of way that's already there next to the railway, to use that as a way to move people beyond just the train itself. So I just think it's a good way it's already there, so we don't have to acquire the land. It's already there. Let's utilize it if we can.
Okay. Sounds good.
Thank you. Route 1 update? Any update?
I'll just repeat what Bill had talked about. We had spoken, and if there's ever going to be a time to obtain funding for the infrastructure, this is it.
Yep.
And I have spoken with Chris, asked him to just wipe the whiteboard clean, take a whole new look at what's going on out on Route 1. And there are a lot of moving parts, and I'm not prepared to get into it now. We're going to be meeting next week. I think once we have some actionable information, the Route 1 subcommittee will have a meeting and talk about what's really, we've been at this a long time.
Yeah.
I think we have all agreed that despite the amount of money being floating around these days, that for the amount of work and the dollar cost of it, it probably doesn't make the cut on a dollar cost benefit that you would normally get for approval of a project. So I think we're going to revisit some of the old ideas we had. And I think, Bill did suggest that, maybe legislatively, Route 1's going to have to come up with its own independent district or a corporation. Just a quick review. Half of Route 1 needs sewer, the other half has good soils and is already built out. The stadium group cannot accept sewage from outside people. That would make them a utility. They're not allowed to be a utility. We had approached the Mansfield, Foxborough Norton district to see if they would have any interest in taking over the stadium plant, and that would relieve that burden, and then that could be expanded. Again, they graciously declined. So there are some other things. This is one of those. Don't summon the devil and then expect him to behave. There's a lot of things that we did not want to ever anticipate doing, and I think it's all on the table now. So we're going to again just clean board, start from scratch. Again, you get reuse water. We've got water wells out there. There's an issue of recharging the water. Assuming just say you build a new plant down the street, and everybody buys into a corporation. That gets them off the burden. It opens it up to other people. So there's a lot of stuff, maybe a nothing burger, but we're going to look at everything. Okay? So that's it.
Thanks, Mike.
Thank you. We'll be getting together within a month.
Then the resurfacing?
Oh, yeah, so we did have a public hearing on the resurfacing, bless you. And that went well. The one little victory was that I felt listened to, because they did, as part of their proposal, propose a sort of large pole, I think it was a gantry of some sort, with a pedestrian crossing signal at the top of the hill, sort of in the area of the auto parts store, Dunkin' Donuts, State Police Barracks, that area. They also have said that the speeds were about 45 miles an hour in there. And they mentioned they were on the fence as to whether to require it. They went back and forth. So Greg Spear wrote a letter expressing concern about that, and I also did too, just expressing concern that, you know, it seems like the speeds are much greater, and I don't know that people would know to stop or they'd have time to stop. So they did write back and say that they've removed that from the plan. So hopefully folks didn't want it, but it just seemed, the consensus around here was that it was very dangerous. The people go a lot faster than 45, and then you're almost giving the implication that they're safe to cross, and I just don't know if you can guarantee that on Route 1 with people traveling at the speeds they do. So their point was is people are already crossing. So it's that, you know, it's hard, but again, so we leave it to the greater experts, but the fact that they sort of backed down on it tells me that they weren't that entrenched on it, and maybe they just needed to hear some real world. So. And then Dan, did you want to just talk about some of the project that the planning board approved last week? I mean, that's a kind of exciting economic development from a national level. You know, we're going to be.
No, yeah, and we presented in front of the craft group presented in front of the planning board last week, and then I think the following day there was a media blitz. Press release, so the north end of the stadium, where it's kind of a horseshoe right now, will be enclosed with some new facilities, clubs included, big new lighthouse and lantern at the end to give us kind of our iconic image from the parking lot and from Route 1, quite honestly. So it's roughly for that project about $150 to $200 million job. So while we're hoping for an extended season with the Patriots, we will start as soon as the season concludes.
And it's a 2-year process, right? It'll be done in 2 phases. Yes. So next season it'll be half done, and the Jumbotron won't be as large yet, right? But eventually. That
is correct, yeah. And as Paige mentioned, we will have the largest outdoor HD video board in the NFL, which we're proud of. Can
I see it from Mechanic Street?
I hope not. I hope not. And, it will, yeah, it'll be impactful. It'll kind of, it's been 20 years since we've had any real progress and work done on the north end of the stadium, and so this will be transformational and keep a lot of people busy for our next 2 years. But yeah, we'll operate as we did this year for the 2022 season, and then in the 2023 season we'll have a bunch of operational changes. But this summer we're going to be back in front of the planning board and kind of roll out the rest of the plan.
Thank you.
Any updates on Quarter Point? Nothing official yet?
Correct.
Darn it. Patience.
Nothing I can talk about.
Got it.
All set? All right, business development. So we already touched on the business guide. Just one other item. So I've been having some discussions with Paige about this. I also chair a Town Asset Review Committee, and this is a committee that in the past we would look at different parcels of land around the town to see if they could be somehow developed to be brought onto the tax rolls. And so, for example, you know, at one point the fire station was on that list, and that rolled its way forward to economic development and ended up where we are now. So I did reach out to Bill and also spoke with George and Paula Maloney from our tax collector and treasurer. And there are a few more properties that are potentially coming up in the final stages in the court system to make them available for looking at for this process. So I think when Paige is back in January or after January, we're going to get together and re-up that committee consisted of myself. We had the finance director, tax collector, a couple of folks from the planning board. Barney, I think you were on it, maybe. And the building commissioner. You weren't on it, Barney? Okay. So building commissioner was part of the group also. So hopefully by that time we'll have some more information from on the outcome of those properties that are coming towards the end of that whole process, and we can take some action on those. We bring those to economic development to discuss. So that's it for business development. Any questions?
Lorraine, if you could just, I think at that time, we'll talk about this, I'm sure, a few times ahead of time, but we just like to prioritize the properties that, you know, for instance, if we don't end up in a situation where we do anything with the laundry building, we certainly want to try to prioritize that, as well as the auditorium building and the school, the vacant school, because those become insurance challenges for us as well. So we have to really be mindful of that. And I'm trying, you know, that's why I think they should retain priority in terms of the future development. We were able to get the fire station taken care of, thank God, because that was, you know, just a liability, and the funeral home itself, you know, waiting to happen if we didn't do something with that soon. So fortunately, that's in play now. So we're getting that's under construction. But I think the priority should be to at least get those ones that are actual structures off the books,
Okay.
and do something with them, whether they're for town use or for private use. Because the longer they sit there, the more they continue to deteriorate and become potential liabilities for us. Mm-hmm. So I'd like to see us, you know, trying to address those sooner rather than later. Okay. And then, you know, there's other things that come online. I'm not that familiar with anything that's all that inspiring in terms of new property that we're looking at, but stuff happens all the time. So we'll have to take another look at it once the opportunity presents itself.
Okay. Thanks, Bill.
You're welcome.
Okay, the next update, website content?
We got nothing.
Nothing.
But I will say, we had, I think Leah, Heather, I don't know if Bill was on it. We met with the guy Steve Kirby about, I think we mentioned it to this group already. There was a website and they were releasing a new module, and it has since been released. He keeps emailing me, and it's a nice, a helpful tool of data that you can add to your website. So that's something I think, you know, again, as part of this organization, branding, marketing, that perhaps we could looking at that, or other tools that kind of help us share with the potential parties what type of properties we have and why they'd want to look here. So I think I've just been ignoring that. I haven't really had a chance to sit down with him, but I remember it was relatively small dollars, I mean, for the costs, so it wasn't a big commitment at the time. So I think we'll have to revisit that. But our website is, it's good. Like, the good thing is it's basic, it's there. It's not like current, and it's not dynamic, which is frustrating, but it is a good resource. So at least it is there. If someone searches it, they'll find what they're looking for. And in fact, even today I was on Mansfield's, who happens to be Choose Mansfield. Mm-hmm. We were Choose Foxborough first, I believe, just saying. But I was on theirs, and I was looking at it, and I was all impressed, and then I clicked on their available properties, and it brought me right to LoopNet. So I was like, yes, because, you know, LoopNet is just, anyone could, so that made me feel like we weren't as behind, but I would love to have something accurate and update there, and be able to find a way to keep that at least, you know, visited every month or so that it's not stagnant, and that if anybody goes there, you know, 2 months apart, they're not like, oh, no one's touching this. And that's the way it does feel right now. So we could talk about, you know, a summer intern or something. I don't know if I want to do that, but I mean, there is some labor that would be helpful, but it is a big responsibility keeping an intern busy as well. So I'm on the fence on that, especially with COVID sometimes, depending on where. I think we'll be, I don't know. You know, if we're out of it, it's a different story. If we're in it, everything's more complicated.
Okay.
So the website needs some love.
Yep. All right,
Heather, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I agree with you. We do the best we can, but we really need some actual professional help. And just when we were kind of starting to learn it, our mentor and trainer left, so then we, kind of got stuck again. So.
Okay. Heather, do you want to do the Uptown update?
Sure. Yep. So we did have the ribbon cutting for Foxborough Nutrition, and that was actually Leah and Paige really ran with that. But and we want to do those more often. The more businesses open, the bakery's going to be opening, and so Christina got us scissors and ribbons, and so we're kind of ready to go whenever those things come up, and that was really well received. We did the tree lighting, and the JCs did the decorations. And it looks great up there. I mean, with the electrical done, and we're talking about already what we're going to do next year. So I think that's really positive. We kind of touched on this earlier, but we are having a meeting in January to try to get all of the various groups that contribute to all of the activities and everything that happens in town all in one room, at least one representative of each group, the JCs and the library and recreation and DPW and EDC and Foxborough Common Business Collaborative, so that one hand knows what the other hand is doing, because there are often times that there are events that, they could be coordinated better. So we're going to try to get everybody in a room and sort of try to figure out a way to do that, because we have so many groups and so many amazing volunteers, but we all kind of need to get on the same page. I've also been talking to Christina in Bill's office about trying to maybe connect the Uptown Happenings Facebook page, so that you can get directly to some of these other links, or so that we can get information on there quicker and out to people. I'm not really sure how to do that, but Christina's really good at that. So she's kind of working on that. What else, Leah? I feel like there was even more going on, but it seems like we've been very busy lately.
The Christmas lights, I'm looking at some of the downtown or uptown building owners like Jay Barros and Foxborough Nutrition put some lights up. And then a thought I had, I don't even know if I mentioned it to you yet, Heather. I think I mentioned it to Paige, but a lot of the times when people are looking for property uptown, it's not like Route 1 where they're using a commercial broker. It's, the guy at Primo's might put a sign up front, or the Duffys put a sign on the front of the building. It would be nice to have a spot, and maybe it's just a list. Like maybe it's if someone calls your office page, you guys have a pulse on kind of what's out there. Because I know I get tagged in that a lot, like on Facebook, and just, driving around, the Duffys have a sign out, Primo's has a sign out, Share Bliss, the old Share Bliss, there's a sign. So as much, that stuff's not on like a LoopNet. It's not listed with a realtor. It's just mom and pop stuff, and trying to help them out with those.
I think that'd be easy to do. We could create a list, a data. We have a list of all the properties, and then just between like all of us and just seeing them pop up, even if they forget to tell us, it's not so many that it's overwhelming.
Right.
So
yeah, and those don't really exist anywhere else besides like that word of mouth or drive by type of stuff. So.
And there isn't a lot of vacancy typically. I mean, it doesn't
Right.
seem. I mean, maybe little small ones, but the nice thing is most of our spaces are, are occupied and continue to be. The other stuff that we have going on, I did get a request for some improved signage over to the Schneider lot. Basically, if you're coming, I think from the Rotary past O'Reilly's right there, maybe something that directs people to go straight, because most of the parking signs right now are more oriented towards mechanic, and then maybe something so that if you're coming, I'm trying to remember what I think it was mostly just along Bird Street they wanted to do it, but that prompted me to start thinking about, Shoveltown's going to be opening in, spring, so we're talking 4 or 5 months, and then we are going to start to see parking challenges uptown. I know there were some big complaints on social media about the Nutcracker performance the other
and
night.
I had actually talked to Chris and Lance and sent them pictures before that kind of all blew up, because my daughter's been volunteering up there, so I'm up there a lot, and people now think Rock Hill is one way in its entirety. So you get a lot of people parking on the wrong side of the road, and it's a narrow road. So even with someone on one side, it's tough.
Yeah, I was thinking in addition to our side of things, maybe talking to the Maryland Rodman to sort of, I mean, they might have to put up sandwich boards or something along that stretch that just says you can't park here or whatever, just because that, the bad will that creates just
Yeah.
makes everybody's job harder uptown, you know, because we are always going to have a little bit of traffic challenge. I mean, we know when the Orpheum has something going on, especially with locals, I think the locals are the worst parkers from what I could tell, because they all know everybody and they know they're not going to get ticketed or towed. I think if you're from out of town, you're more nervous. So we see.
And this weekend was kind of a perfect storm with a fair at the Bethany and a performance at the
was it
Orpheum.
both? Okay.
So there was both going on. And I did talk to Jen Rathbun at the Orpheum about it. I brought her outside. I kind of said, look down the road, see what's happening. So it's definitely on there.
So we might want to even touch base with Chief Grace, you know, just from a coordination thing. Because again, you know, starting in April or May, when Shoveltown's open, you know, we want to make sure we have the appropriate signage out there. We do have money in our wayfinding sign budget, so we can enhance the signage. You know, as you recall, we pulled all the signs out of Uptown. So, and we wanted to be selective. So I think we ought to, I don't want to say another committee, but, you know, another couple stakeholders need to be involved, including the police department, and figure out, you know, as we come up with these challenges, how to handle it, and can we predict them, and what should we do, and what signage do we need. You know, then we're going to have the parking lot over at.
When is that opening? That the Orpheum has to be that. And I know that King's going to use it for some of his staging, so I wasn't sure what the timing of that.
That one's not going to be done for a while, right?
Okay.
That's not going to be, because, yeah, he's going to use that for staging, so that won't be done until the 15 apartments are done.
Okay.
And as you know, he hasn't even taken the buildings down, so
Yeah, I
that'll
said it
be
was pretty
lagged
far.
behind for sure. Maybe, I'm guessing a year, but I don't even know. But again, we will want to talk about that. We also, the selectmen might have some action too, because we have that, we want to discuss signage and parking limitations on that parking lot. Also, you have the land behind Judy's that right now Doug King is using for his staging area, but at that point, you know, what does the town want to do with that space? So we have to start thinking strategically as we start to activate those spaces to avoid conflict. And then lastly, you all saw the work out on the common. The temporary curbing is now becoming permanent, and I believe, you know, next spring we'll start working on. We're going to do the other side, Cocasset and Mechanic.
Does anyone know when that lane will open? I noticed tonight when I drove around, the DPW truck's still in the middle of the common. No.
No.
Bill, have you heard?
I have not, no, sorry.
I don't know how long it
Chris
takes
said that he
concrete.
thought by the weekend.
Okay.
So he thought by Friday it was back open. Weather dependent, but so far the weather's cooperated. That's what he said last I heard.
Okay.
That's probably the case.
Yeah.
Because the weather's supposed to stay good until through the weekend, so I think we should be all right. Just a brief storm tonight, but nothing major.
Right.
So I just want to throw something out, and this is sort of, I think John will appreciate this, John Evil will appreciate this, but I think one of the things that was mentioned to me today, Tony, I saw Tony at breakfast this morning, and he said, you know, we really should do something to, you know, to have a formal, and I think we talked about this at the selectmen's meeting the other night, was let's have some sort of a formal recognition of Snyder Electric's contribution to the lighting program on the common, because, you know, they were a big contributor to that, and even maybe put a plaque there of some sort that recognizes their contribution to that. And I think now that the work is almost done, I'm not sure if you want to do it in the spring or you want to do it doing now, but we'd have to get a plaque built and then installed. So it probably wouldn't be until the spring at this point, but if we did do that, it'd be a nice thing to celebrate for the common. The grass hopefully will be back by then anyways. They're going to try and get the grass planted, and it'll actually look really nice. And if we can put some new benches up there, that'll be in good shape as well. So even, you know, all those things contributing to make the common look the focal point in the town, which I think is great. I think it's an opportunity to kind of celebrate the uptown area. So I do think that's something that we should really think about.
Yeah, that would be nice, Bill.
Yeah, I think it'd be great.
Yeah, I had a question. Anybody involved in that common job, is there any opportunity to, I have an interest in maybe obtaining one of the old lanterns that had been there? Do we know that Anderson Electric,
yeah.
take them, are they
Yeah.
somewhere, they're in storage, or are they?
Yeah. Is that who's talking, Mike?
Yes.
That's Mike Stan. Yeah.
Yeah. We've been talking about what we're gonna do with it. We've given one to historical. We gave one to the Drury family because they it was Mr. Drury that did them. And then Bill and I have been talking this paperwork that we have to fill out, but we're talking about doing some kind of a, like an auction, not for money, but, some way, because there's a ton of people. We just have them in storage now, but there's a ton of people that have expressed an interest in them. So yeah, we were gonna,
Okay, well-
there's a couple that were gonna be repurposed to the Payne School, I think.
All right, well, I'm just happy to know that they didn't wind up in a dumpster. And
Oh,
if
no,
there
no,
was-
no,
there
no, I
was
don't,
an
no, no,
opportunity,
no, we saved them.
that'd be good. Well, thank you.
Yeah,
I'm
oh, no.
glad that there may be an opportunity. That's it.
Oh, yeah, no,
Motion to adjourn.
we don't throw anything away if we don't have to.
They're classics.
Yeah, they're great,
Thank you.
yeah.
Well, that's a piece of history of the community. We don't want to just get rid of it if we can help it.
Unless you want to
Right.
tell me where they're stored.
You'll store them, no problem.
I'll get my bolt cutters. Anyhow, that's good news, thank you.
All right.
You're welcome.
So make a
Anything
motion
else?
to
That's
adjourn.
everything we have, right, guys? I
we're
think
all
that's
set.
it.
Yeah, I think that's it.
Motion to adjourn?
Sorry.
All in favor?
Adjourned.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye, guys.
All right.
Merry Christmas.
Happy
Happy holidays,
holidays.
everyone.
Happy New
Happy
Year.
holidays.